Here. As Tavo mentioned, we wanted to mostly have this be an alcohol-fueled networking event with a little bit of content. So what we're doing, I write a newsletter, I produce a podcast, and I organize these events. That's pretty much what I do. And one of the things I've said on a few podcasts, maybe, I don't know if I said it to you, but is the least interesting thing about a startup is the amount of money. What is it building? What is it solving? Et cetera, et cetera. And so I've never been a believer in obsessing over someone raised $1 million, someone raised $2 million, et cetera. But it is important, it matters, we all know. So what I thought would be interesting, and then, in the recent environment, there's been a lot of conversation about, is venture funding going up? Is it going down? What's changing in the atmosphere for raising money? What kinds of businesses are attracting interest? What's going to be hot this year? Will this be a good or bad year for venture funding? And I thought it would be interesting to get the perspective of 2 investors and 1 startup founder. That's what we have up here. Megan McCormick, Jose. Tahir, Savant. I say Savant, you say Savant? I don't know. We pronounce it differently. Janae, you were already introduced. You gave your operating metric, so you don't have to say a word. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a series of questions. And by the way, if anyone wants to jump in, except for Trevor back there, he can shut up. Anyone else want to jump in, please raise your hand, ask a question, shout out a question, and don't really care. As long as everyone's engaged, interacting, and interested in what we're talking about. I'm going to start with an easy question. Megan, tell us who you are and what your company does.
Hi everyone, I'm Megan McCormick. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Jose. We're based in West Africa and Ghana, serving the continent, and we make it possible for banks to lend profitably to micro, small, and medium enterprises through a platform with 2 products. So we have a digital origination system with inbuilt credit scoring on one side for the financial institutions, making it low cost for them to originate and more effective, better risk scoring. And then on the SME side, we have a business management app that generates alternative data, allowing businesses in the micro and small to build up enough of a digital fingerprint that they can now be brought into the formal financial sector.
That was very concise, thank you. And here, tell us what Savant is, very quickly.
Cool, yes.
You have less time than she had.
Okay, so firstly, when I started at Savant, I went.
I'm always going to say Savant.
I said Savant, and then I was in a meeting and the guy said, so Savant does this. So it's actually pronounced Savant.
You said so? Okay.
So we started about 20 years ago as an incubator, venture builder, startup advisory firm, specifically looking at science and engineering type businesses and trying to get those onto the market. And we evolved into a group of companies. So we've got a holding company that's corporate venture programs, investment readiness acceleration, still looking at science and engineering and also deep tech type of businesses. And then we also do venture funding as well. So we've got.
You're a fund manager essentially.
Yeah, we're a fund manager now, but we still do other stuff on the side.
Yeah.
Because
So your day-to-day is looking at companies making investment decisions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's us in a nutshell. I'm a partner.
Okay. Jimmy, is there anything Kino didn't say about longevity that you'd like to say?
Well, I'm not Brown Jesus, that's that.
Oh, no one was going to accuse you of that.
We're a Pan-African seed stage VC fund operating since 2020. We do things at scale. So currently in our portfolio, we've got 142 companies that we've invested in the past 2.5 years. And our goal is to not only do equity, we are now expanding into other products, debt, quasi-debt, working capital.
What is quasi-debt?
It's a proposal I'm working on currently.
Okay, what is the working description of quasi-debt?
Well, it's a debt-like product with equity quantities. So
that doesn't answer my question.
It's when you want to use a product not to fund other than equity, to fund expansion.
It's debt for people who don't like that? Is it debt for people who don't like that?
It's debt for people that want to have an exit opportunity through equity.
I don't know. Oh, I guess we'll have to leave it there. All right. Okay, so first question. Coming into 2024, describe your level of optimism about the startup environment, and we'll define that in a few different ways, kind of wrap that up into one broad definition. finding opportunities for startups to scale, find customers, raise money, whatever they need to do to get on a path to scale. And just generally, your level of optimism coming into 2022. Granted, we're deep into it already, but you can start. I'm not quite Jesus.
Well, my personality is more on I see the glass always half full than empty. So 2023 was
Is it less full than it usually is, or?
It's a smaller glass this time. So you get the illusion of full. 2023 was a really tough year for everybody. I mean, we called it the funding winter.
You have to get up in the middle of this. There's no one's allowed to say funding winter. No, you just said it. It was 2 minutes in. 2 minutes in. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Carry on. Yeah.
But to land that in numbers, if you look at 2022, about 6 billion was invested in early stage startups in Africa. That only translated into about 3.9 last year. So you could see the drop. Why the drop is that a lot of the capital of that 6 billion, 75% of it was global capital. So we see a lot what I call capital tourism. People come to Africa, they say, oh, let's see, it's the continent, the final frontier. Let's do one deal.
I think we can get into that a little more. That point, I think, is probably worth exploring a little deeper.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you look at who's putting in the one deal, there are 1,000 investors in 2022 in Africa. 800 of them only do one deal. 33 of them do 4 deals or more, and only 6 companies did 10 deals or more. So this tourism thing is what we need to change.
What is the cutoff from being a tourist to a non-tourist? Is it another one?
One deal.
That's a tourist. 2 deals is not a tourist.
I would say if you do 4 more.
Okay. We have a definition. Okay. All right. Cool.
And so the winter was not the winter.
Okay.
The season was terrible, but globally.
Okay.
And if the world has a sneezes, Africa has the flu, right? And so what we are seeing though this year is a lot more activity early on. Funds, investors still have mandates, and they still have mandates to execute. And we are now seeing that even in difficult environments, people are starting to invest. There's been a lot of investment already in Q1 of this year. So I'm quite optimistic that in a challenging environment, we are now learning how to do deals. Not just because there's the herd mentality, everyone's doing it, but because people are now specifically looking at their mandates and what type of companies to invest.
So they have money they have to put to work, but they're just going to do it smarter.
They have to put their money to work.
Okay.
It's smart.
Hey, you and I kind of talked about that not too long ago.
Did we?
Well, yeah, we sort of did. Yeah. When we were talking about Savant. Yeah.
So it's very interesting, that point on tourism. So for me, if I define, what's not a tourist investor, it's somebody or fund manager that actually has a headquarter or an operation on the continent. So they're actually in the market.
That's a tougher definition.
Yeah, no, but it has to be, because if you're not in the market, you don't actually get to understand how things work, right? And so the deals that you do aren't necessarily going to be representative of what should be done in that context. But the positive thing is there are more of those non-tourist investors investing now, looking at Q3 of last year, which is positive, because what that means is that pricing is going to be more reflective of what should be happening on this continent.
Point being that tourist investors inflated valuations? Is that what you're saying?
Well, if there's an oversupply of capital and...
Okay, that is what you're saying then. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So Megan, you represent the founder here. What's the founder's perspective?
I don't disagree with anything that's been said.
Well, let's say something else.
My first question to an investor when they reached out to me and were talking is, what companies have you invested in Africa? Because I'm not going to be somebody's first. And so I think in the boom times, maybe that wasn't the best decision, because we didn't get a lot of very, very cheap capital from tourist investors who mistakenly thought that apps had
I think we have a title for this conversation. Investment tourism.
But it means that the partners we have are great partners that know the market and know talent here that can help us grow. And I think it's why I'm very optimistic to answer your question about what this year is going to bring.
So I had a bunch of questions, but I don't want to open
Can
that
I
for
change the tourism narrative? Because
Okay, go ahead. I kind of like it, but go ahead.
what's important now is that local African investors, family offices, and corporates invest in this ecosystem. That's the ensures the sustainability of it. And so tourism is great, but unless your local people travel in their own country,
It's not sustainable. It's the point that we're making. It's not sustainable. So this is an interesting sort of pivot. One of the things that was talked, I think it was last year or the year before, I forget which, when there was a couple of big exits. That often produces a lot of investors. Did that happen? Or did you see that happening, say, over the next near term, where people who had a nice exit become those native investors? That was talked about, but I'm wondering if it's really happening.
I think from a West African perspective, we definitely see that in Nigeria.
Okay.
So even if there haven't been massive exits, when there was really competitive rounds in 2021, 2022, there was a lot of secondaries.
Right.
And there was a ton of seed stage companies. So you had founders who had some free cash flow putting in checks in the earliest round, and you didn't have that in Ghana. And it was really interesting. I go back and forth between the two countries, seeing what that did for the early stage ecosystem in Nigeria compared to Ghana is still very small and struggles to get companies, especially companies with local founders off the ground. So I don't think we need the big exits to make that happen, but I'm excited for when more exits come to see the multiplier effect of that.
And what other ways are more African-based investors coming into investment? It can't just be a big exit. There has to be you mentioned corporates are creating funds. I mean, what's happening? Give us more on what's happening in the environment where the tourism phase is behind us.
Just on that exit point, maybe. So I was at Janelle was also at that conference. It was a family office conference about a couple of weeks ago in Cape Town.
I thought it'd be Dubai, but whatever.
And I think about 20% of the people that I spoke to there actually had exited businesses. You know, African family offices that was spun out of the fact that they were able to exit these businesses, and now they're in the business of building family offices. And what are those family offices doing? They're actually reinvesting on the continent. You know, so so I think, and these aren't well publicized exits. These aren't. Some of them aren't even enormous exits, but it gives you the pedestal, gives you the capital.
It doesn't have to be good.
Right?
I mean, it doesn't have to be a huge exit for one person to have money to invest.
Exactly. Yeah. And so those people are then turning around and are capitalizing in their own way. So some of them are investing in funds, some of them are investing in startups directly. You know, some of them are actually just trying to drive impact. Some of them now have quite a bit of clout, so they're trying to get infrastructure spend going into the right places, which will then catalyze more ecosystem growth. You know, so there is this cycle now starting to awaken where we are seeing more.
What do you think the near-term outcome of this will be? I mean, what's the outcome of this going to be?
Outcome of that? More money.
Well, that.
But I think it's for me. I think it's more. I think a lot more sense in the type of businesses that we build, but also alternatives to venture capital. Because a lot
That's
of
what I want to get into a little bit. Go ahead.
Because a lot of these people are not necessarily going and doing venture capital deals to actually say, well, I'm a well-connected business angel, I can catapult this business so much further. So they're going and doing those types of deals. So giving founders now alternatives to, you know, because if you go into the market now, everybody's like, I'm starting a business, I need VC funding. But the truth is, you don't actually need VC funding, right?
So I'd like to hear everyone on that point. Is VC funding really necessary? Well, what are the alternatives I'll put in the closet then? For VC funding, I'd like to hear some conversation about that because that's interesting. I mean, if I'm an early stage founder, if I have 5 people and I haven't raised a dime yet or rented or whatever, do I have to raise VC money? The other thing is just grow slow and get some customers and do some traction. Is that? But that leads often to an equity round, right?
Yes.
You're proving yourself to venture capital. How about you do that? What else? What other alternatives are there for you to raise money? Did you say alternatives to VC? I want to hear what that means.
Yeah. So let me start with the exits because ironically 2023 was our biggest exit ever in Africa. instantly was acquired for 600 million by a European fund.
Yeah,
And since,
some damn tourist.
since 2020, we've had 134 exits. And we track ourselves against
How does that break?
India and LATAM, which is probably a decade ahead of us. And if you think that they have 149 unicorns now, they've had 5,000 exits, more than 250 million. So this ecosystem needs time, right? The problem coming to what alternatives is, there aren't only alternatives. You either go VC route or you depend on
Or you bootstrap.
or loan sharks. Not looking at
Okay, I wasn't
just
really
looking at the
thinking
general
about
election. I was just looking at the general election, but the loan sharks.
Yeah, we have a few stars in this country.
The reality is we need innovation around how do we find SMEs in Africa. And you know, we always talk about VC, but actually the VC model in Africa is just a high growth SME model. It is certainly not the Silicon Valley VC model. Right? And so how do we innovate as investors, as participants around working capital facilities? Right? If you ask founders, what do you need? You need to build up a capital stack for them, which starts with working capital, operational capital, right? 95% of your founders will say that. Then you say, but I need to buy strategic support, which is your equity round. You buy people that bring a different set of skills to grow and scale your business. Then you add all of these things. And though that's why our strategy is, how do we now start building out a capital stack? We start with equity because that's all we have in this country. But over time, we have to reinvest.
Just to add something, so I founded OZE in 2018, where there wasn't people coming, there weren't people here investing, like, it was very little investment, venture capital investment going on. And speaking to an advisor, someone who had built a tech company in Ghana, they said, if you want to get to the point where you can start attracting capital, you need revenue. And it takes money to build products, but you yourself can deliver a service. So in OZE's early days, we would sell services where the revenue, the project, that service was all about now building the technology that now we're able to productize. So it takes a little bit longer, right? If my attention is divided between building the product and delivering the service, but it means that we are going to be able to make it and become a big venture-backed company, very profitable. And so revenue is always a great way to fund a business.
Great.
Some of the things that we've done previously was, so we science and engineering that, so you try to take that, build a business out of that, you need a big balance sheet to actually get started, you need a project to start, and so some of the things that we've done in the past is we've actually gone to big corporates and we said, listen, so this is really cool innovation, there's actually no cash to do this, there's no VC that's going to fund this, there's no grant that's going to cover this, but it's squarely within your alley. This is how it can enhance your value chain. Why don't we build this business for you and then we'll do a revenue share model, So you're actually building a business with somebody else's balance sheet. It's not the ideal scenario, but it gets you off the ground. So there are creative ways to go about these things. In some other contexts, our incubator has actually built a business around providing grant capital to get people or innovators to productize their revenue so they can actually get to market and get a data point so that they can get VC money, So there are ways, but there's not a lot of these opportunities around. If you don't have access to the networks, you can't actually make these things happen. And so that's one of the big challenges that we have.
I wasn't planning to bring AI into this conversation, but I'm going to. So I read and also wrote a little something recently about a statement Sam Altman has made and others have made that we're on the cusp of the one-person unicorn. I think you all kind of know what I'm talking about, right? So what struck me, and correct me if this is thinking wrong about it, is that could be a very interesting opportunity in Africa, because one smart person who really knows how to use AI to automate everything you need to do, build a product, etc., your creating content, etc. How does that impact? How are you thinking about that? Do you buy that as an inevitability, as many people seem to? And how does it affect your thinking about venture in Africa in the near future? Anyway.
My brother does their work. He's a genius, by the way.
I'm
I'm
sure
sure
that
the
is.
genius doesn't get the
He probably says, so broad.
But he actually made a comment, and he said he actually never needs to hire a junior developer again because he can actually use AI. It takes him less time to actually vet what the AI has done, and it would to hire a junior person and vet what they've done, and then put it into the larger
It
system.
hasn't replaced him.
Sorry?
It's not going to replace him anymore.
No.
Okay.
So that's the one thing of it. But on the other side, you know, we've got businesses in the portfolio where AI is actually able to help use vibrations and sound noises to actually predict machine health. You know, so now you don't need to send people out all the time. Now you can sort of remotely sort of say.
This is the geezer thing we talked about. This is, no, it's something else.
This is beyond the users. So, you know, refrigeration units, particular hum, listens to that, says this hum is not correct, something's wrong, it needs to go in for repairs. So those sort of things are being enabled now. We don't actually need to go and send a technician out every time. You can predict and pay people for an ongoing service, you know. So there's a different kind of business now emerging from what used to be a very sort of manual, analog type of business.
Okay, we have to wrap up pretty soon here, but anyone else have a quick comment on this question?
Yeah, I always have fun. So,
Yeah.
so I'm a little bit more old school. We like to see AI that solves real world problems. So if you can put AI on slide 3, we're quite happy, not on slide 1, because we want to see what problems it actually solves. AI certainly for all businesses is there for productivity and efficiency. We should all be adopting it. As a fund, we've adopted it quite strongly on how we manage our business, but it still solves real problems. The thing is, AI is going to get you to your first 1 million customers very quickly, but then you still have to run a business with people, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to think about how do I scale this business, which is not only dependent on one technology around AI. And that, I think, founders are missing at the moment. So your guy is going to get to 1 million very quickly, but then afterward, it's a big business. It needs people to support it.
Okay. Okay. All right, well, please join me in thanking our panel.